These institutions were never created for the benefit of the greater world. And yet, today, like fools, nations have been invited to become members of the United Nations. For what reason?
And there is no provision in any of the documents of the UN, whether the Charter or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that says we cannot leave. The reason why we don't leave is because we are disunited.
Yes, here we are, dear family, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Make Africa Great. Today we are going to look on the statement of Mama Africa, Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, concerning about the withdrawal of Africa from the United Nations. Mama Africa, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao just shook the table once again. She said it's plain and clear. Africa must withdraw from the United Nations. Yes, you heard that right. The big question is, do you agree with her? Will African nations agree with her and do what she feel African nation has to do? So let us wait what will happen, but let's break this down together.
These institutions were never created for the benefit of the greater world. And yet, today, like fools, nations have been invited to become members of the United Nations. For what reason? African nations, an entity that was created to rebuild Europe, are asked to become members, and we are happy to be members of the United Nations. When you look at what African nations are doing when they go to the United Nations year in and year out, African nations are receiving brown envelopes, in some cases just being forced to vote on issues pertaining to other nations but never African nations. So to answer your question very bluntly and honestly, African nations need to pull out of the United Nations. Yeah. There is nothing there for us. We are there just to be used. We are there for them to say when they go to the world stage, where Africans present, check. Beyond a check mark, there's nothing else for us. I would hope that one day African leaders can take a position. If you look at when they were wanting us to be represented at the UN Security Council, we want you Africans to come and be part of the UN Security Council. But like a little boy, come into the room, and by the way, there's a small boy chair for you there. Sit there and be quiet.
Yes, that is Mama Africa, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. Now, before anyone calls this extreme, let's ask one thing. What has the UN actually done for Africa? When NATO removed Gaddafi, what UN said? When Libya was destroyed, Prospera's United Libya were destroyed, what UN did at that time? Where was the UN when France, all of us we know, looted Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso for decades under colonial puppets? Where Africans crying for justice in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Sudan, the UN is silent. As I speak to you now, Sudan is under fire. What UN is doing to make sure that Sudan is going back to the peace or to the peaceful nation? So tell me, are we really part of the UN or just sidelines, spectators, as Mama Africa said? You know, you may ask many questions. We have been talking about UN Security Council permanent seat for African nations. And of course, we need only single if Africa is united. So where is Africa position in the UN Security Council? Sometimes that's why you see people like Mama Arikana saying maybe we need to go out of this organization because it is not in favor of Africans. So, brothers and sisters, I'm waiting to hear from you. Of course, even Professor P.L. Lumumba has said something on that matter. Let us go and listen a little bit also from Professor P.L. Lumumba, a father of Pan-Africanism in the continent of Africa right now. Let us go and listen, Professor Lumumba.
Maybe we could try the other one? Yes.
Thank you very much. Let me start by agreeing with my sister that this institution, when it was created in 1945, all African countries, excluding Liberia and Ethiopia, were still under colonial rule. So it was created without us. The architecture is against us. That is why you have the permanent members, and the vote of any of those members can veto all other votes. And there is no provision in any of the documents of the UN, whether the Charter or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that says we cannot leave. The reason why we don't leave is because we are disunited. Because we want to be good little boys. And it's not only the UN that they have created to divide us. The Commonwealth,
Yes.
La Francophonie, the community of Portuguese-speaking countries. The day we organize ourselves under the aegis of the African Union and we speak with a single voice, that is the day we'll recognize that we don't need some of these bodies which gained their legitimacy by having Africans playing what in English is called the gooseberry. You just sit there for it to be said that you are there. So I can't agree more that the time is now for Africa to rethink her membership in many of these organizations. But that requires unity, coherent, common policy on international relations. And the day we define ourselves, then we'll discover that the world will come for us. However you define the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that is Professor P.L. Lumumba. As a lawyer, he said there's no document or law that can stop anyone from withdrawing. So if some African countries, maybe they see that this organization is not working for the interest of them, they can withdraw. There's no law or legal documentation that prohibits or that can deny any member to withdraw. So, dear lovely family friends, there are those who said for Africa to be respected, we need maybe to have a strong, united Africa, not under African Union, because there are those who said African Union is still weak. And if you listen, many commentators are saying African Union are already occupied by others. But all in all, family friend, let us continue with what the conversation was talking about. So I'm very happy to say one thing that we need to do as Africa is to come together.
So let me
Let me, as I answer that question, let me say how happy I am that in this conference I don't have a banner of Western organizations that have sponsored this conference.
And I think that deserves a big round of applause.
And I say that because this is how it begins. It begins this way. And when we make the decision, and allow me this analogy, which I've used elsewhere, that if the sheep knew that is the shepherd who will be eating them one by one, they would rebel against the shepherd, not the wolves. So that when he is chasing the wolves away, it is not for your benefit, is for fattening you for another day, until the day that we know that all these organizations fatten Africa for their benefit. My good friend, Dr. Arikana, served, albeit in the United States, as an ambassador of the AU. That organization is almost 70% funded, 90% funded by other organizations. And if our English is still correct, he or she who pays the piper calls the tunes. So, but is it not possible, if we were to be persuaded, if African governments were to say all African governments charge something called VAT, suppose we were to say that if it is 16% VAT, 2% will go to 1% to regional organization, 1% to the African Union. We would fund African Union. Then we would begin to prioritize what we do. What you see in Addis Ababa every year is an annual jamboree where people meet to read speeches which have been written for them. And then they wait for another. Take, for example, the year 2020 was the year of silencing of the guns. The guns are allowed.
Yes.
We are in the month of July, 4 months away. This year will have ended. This is the year of the African Union for reparations. How many of you have heard about that theme?
No, reparations
Very few.
have not come to Africa.
So the truth is that we must rethink. And I want to conclude with this. What Europe and America and others do is also to recruit some from within our ranks, to torpedo the good that we are doing. The fifth columnists. So we must be aware. Who do we initiate? We must make a solemn decision that we have African meetings where there is nobody but Africans. It is not going to be easy. Let's remind ourselves. It is going to be 5 steps forward, 2 backwards, but we are moving. It is intergenerational. Once you recognize that, then you'll not be worried. My good friend, Dr. Obi there, told us she's been in this space. We've been in this space. The good doctor there have been in this space. Yours is to take over the baton and run your leg. Your children and children's children, it is an intergenerational war and fight. Yeah. But it must be fought and it must be won. And I conclude by saying, when I see us, how did we get to know each other? How did I get to know all this? We are discovering ourselves. So the journey is on, but there are potholes along the way. But we must move on. And move on, we will.
Okay.
I agree with you completely. One of the things that is being done from a very practical standpoint, I know there is now a movement which is operating under the African People's Union. And what it wants to do is to bring pressure to bear on Pan-African institutions to begin to take positive action. It is not going to be easy. There is going to be pushback. In the intervening period is to identify what I call coalitions of the willing and start with those coalitions of the willing with a view to planting the seed and watering that seed. It is not going to be easy. I know several years ago I talked to one head of state in East Africa, and after that conversation there is something that was called the fast tracking of East African Federation. Yes. It also was dead on arrival. So we'll do 10 things and we'll succeed on the 10th one. So don't be tired. Don't be tired of asking these questions. I was telling my wife just a few minutes ago that I write to letters, I write to president, and some people ask me, don't you get tired? And I said, I consider myself to be like Paul in the Bible. Did you see the reply of the Galatians to Paul?
Yes.
There isn't. So I keep on writing because that is the role that I play.
That's it.
And when you look at it from that point, you never tire. Of course, as my good friend Madame Obi said, sometimes you feel that it is not worth it. That is when you re-energize yourself. That is when I send Arikana a message. That is when she sends me a message. That is when I send Okorie a message and others within the room. It can be done.
Thank you.
Yes, that is Professor P.L.O. Lumumba. But let us go back to the statement of Mama Arikana, because Mama Arikana is the one who created this motion. Dr. Arikana is not saying this out of emotion. She's saying it from experience. She was the African Union ambassador to the United States of America. So she's not from outside. She knows something, and she know how this system work, or rather how they don't work for Africa. So we have, or maybe we have almost 54 nations or countries, but we have 0 permanent seats in the UN Security Council. Meanwhile, a country like France and the UK, who colonized and abused us, still make decisions on global security on our behalf. So just imagine the population of Africa, 1.4 billion people, even more than 1.4 billion people, we are not represented in the UN Security Council. But France and UK, these small countries, can decide on behalf of us. So the question is, should we continue legitimizing this broken structure, or build our own? Or we have to force them to restructure the UN Security Council structure, where Africa will be part of decision, not just as observer, but as with the veto power, where African can decide and make decisions. So, family, friends, this is not just about leaving the UN. It is about Africa dignity. It's about saying we are not children. We are no longer beg for respect. We are claiming our power. So if I think African nation can join Mama Arikana and say we are not going to attend next meeting until we have changed this, or maybe until UN is changing this and doing this for Africa. I hope they can do something for us. But right now, Africans, we are busy about reparation. You remember 3 years ago, the former president of US, Joe Biden, promised Africa on the matter of, I remember, 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council, but with no veto power. So today we have Mr. Trump, but Trump is not talking about those things. Trump is busy of making America great again. So if we think American leaders can support Africa, the regime of Biden is over. So Trump has his own agendas, not to give Africa 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council. Trump is looking for making America great again. So what is our agenda as Africa? Right now we have 2 agendas, whether we want reparation or we want 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council. But how can we attain those things if we continue in this division? So we need to be united as Africa in order to demand justice and respect from those who has been abusing us. So, but we cannot achieve those things if we continue in division ways. So African nations must come together and unite. So, brothers and sisters, we have seen countries in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso already raised in the Sahel. So, if we can join those countries, I hope Africa can get what they want. But because of, as I said many times, we have leaders, political leaders, who are being used by others, as Mama Arikana Chihombori-Quao always said, that we have leaders who are in the payroll of other agencies or Western agencies. So they will not join Traore, because if they join Traore, they feel that they are making their masters. So their masters will become hungry, so they don't want to make their master angry. And that's why we have been saying we need a new governance system that will bring patriotic leaders Right now, we have systems that can bring anyone, can bring even a thief to be a president. Even bad people can become a president, because what we look right now is about money. If you have money, you can contest, you can campaign, you can fund campaign, and you can give people bribes, and you can become the president. But all in all, what we are saying, we want good leaders who will unite the people of Africa.
When we went to I remember one summit, this was in Niger. When we were registering, I just get naughty sometimes. I just go into places I'm not expected to go. But I noticed the room we were registering, they were mostly white people. And I said, wait a minute. Here we are, they're also using facial recognition registration. So I said, I need to find out who these white people are. So I just was acting foolish and cracking jokes. And I sat next to one white man. So what are you doing? And the man had a personal cell phone. He's taking pictures of everybody who's getting their IDs. It turned out this was a French company that was hired to register Africa's best, Africa's leaders, let me say.
And collect the data.
And they're collecting the data, including facial recognition.
Wow.
At the African Union Summit. Why? Couldn't we found an African company that could do this? But all our data, and oh, by the way, who owns that company? The wife of one of the former presidents of France. I rest my case.
Okay, Professor, it could be a starting point.
In fact, none of them need to attend the African Union Summit. This is about Africans discussing African issues, our continental agenda, coming up with a true common African position that can be implemented with a pathway. But to talk about common African position that cannot be implemented, even the AFCFTA, try building a highway connecting the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Do you know what blocks that railway will go through as it goes? Because we are not together. Prime Minister spoke about the railway network. When you see it, it's beautiful. The things that can be done with these railway lines. But what we end up doing is we go to sleep and we dream about those railway lines. And it ends there. Empowering the African Union and give it teeth is what the leaders should do if they mean business. But they don't.
Also, Mama Africa has spoken on the issue of African Union inviting other people. We have seen in meetings or summits of African Union, we see other people. We have seen the UN secretary attending African Union summits. We have seen, of course, even Israel wanted to become observer in the African Union. So, but you look, have you seen the Chinese attending European Union summit, or Chinese or Russians? Of course, Russia was the member, or any African countries applying for being observer in the European Union. But in Africa, if you watch the African Union summit, you find other civilization. Yes, we need to collaborate with others, but when we discuss our issues, I think we need to be serious the way we see Europeans are doing. But in Africa, when we want to do something, we have to inform other people. So there's no secret. There's no secret. Every plan that we have on the table, others know that we are going to do this and that. That's why sometimes you find leaders are not attending to African Union summits. You remember President Museveni spoken like that, said he will not attend because there's nothing that is being going on there. So Dr. Arikana has spoken very well on that matter. But let us continue, dear lovely family. So this is, as I said, this is not just about leaving the UN. It's about Africa dignity and restoring the respect of African people. So I want to hear from you. Do you agree with Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao? Should Africa withdraw from the UN and take destiny into its own hands? Those are just questions that maybe you have something to share with us. Drop your comment below, link, share, and subscribe to Make Africa Great, because this conversation is just getting started. Until next time, my dear lovely family, if you don't stand for Africa, until next time, my dear lovely family, remember that if we don't stand for Africa, no one else will. Power to the people, power to Africa. Let us come together, unite, and make Africa great. Stay in power. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.